We've got a great show lined up for you to kickstart your day. So here's what's coming up in the next hour. Last night, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss laid out their plans for Britain's future. At the first Tory leadership hustings in Leeds, the former Chancellor said he would support the return of grammar schools, while Liz Truss promised to revive Northern powerhouse rail. But who came out ahead in the polls? Yet more outrage over energy bills. The UK's two biggest energy companies have announced soaring profits, despite thousands across the country barely being able to make ends meet. Should the government be investing more into energy infrastructure, or does the solution lie elsewhere? The Ministry of Defence say that Ukraine's attacks on Russian-held Kherson are gaining momentum as President Zelensky's forces attempt to retake the region. Is this the first step to a free Ukraine, or will Putin's retaliation be even more drastic? We're also expecting a live update from Boston regarding the absolutely heartbreaking stabbing of a 9-year-old girl, so please stay tuned for that as well. We've got all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. As always, folks, your views are much more important than my own, so get involved. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, folks, here are my thoughts on the NHS Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic closing. Much in the same way that political correctness meant that we ignored the stories of girls being raped by grooming gangs for fear of accusations of racism, we also missed the plight of vulnerable girls for fear of accusations of transphobia or bigotry. Some of these girls were prescribed a diet of puberty blockers, hormone treatments, and even surgical intervention. These are the words of Kira Bell, who transitioned to a trans male as a teenager but came to regret it. There was no exploration of the feelings that I had, no psychiatric assessment. It was very brief and based on my recent past. There was no in-depth discussion. Kira made history in a landmark case that exposed the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock and Portman Clinic in London. She was put on puberty blockers at the age of 16. A year later, she was receiving testosterone shots. And when she was 20, she had a double mastectomy. Kira is possibly unable to have children. She's lost her breasts and now has a changed voice and facial hair. She regretted all of those things and said the clinic should have actually challenged her decision to go ahead with the treatment more robustly. And you might well think, well, Darren, that's fine. Come on. Sometimes people make mistakes and regret the decisions that they've made. And I agree with that. The problem is that ideology has arguably been placed above protecting children, which must be the most essential part of any decent society. A fear of accusations of some ism or phobia, in my opinion, is preventing some professionals from pursuing therapeutic options, exploring those options. The number of people seeking the clinic's help is 20 times higher than it was a decade ago. That's jumping from 250 referrals to 5,000 in 2021. Why didn't such a massive jump trigger an immediate internal investigation? In Kira's case, the court noted the practitioners at Tavistock didn't put forward any clinical explanation for the dramatic rise in girls being diagnosed. They also expressed surprise at its failure to collate data on the age of patients when they began puberty blockers. Now, when the courts accepted the case, the NHS asserted that the effects of puberty blockers are fully reversible. But the NHS then reversed that assertion, acknowledging that little is known about the long-term side effects on a teenager's body or brain. That's why I was delighted to read that the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is going to be shut down by the foundation after a review found that, and these aren't my words, these are the reviews of the NHS themselves, who have said that it is not safe for children patients who cannot, in my opinion, decide for themselves whether to pursue these interventions. A BBC Newsnight report actually claimed that some parents would take their child to this clinic and openly admit that they would prefer a trans outcome over a gay outcome. All the while, of course, the NHS was pitching itself as progressive in its pursuit of puberty prevention. Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust released a statement in response to the clinic's closure, saying this: their staff have worked tirelessly and under intense scrutiny in a difficult climate. We are proud and thankful for their extraordinary efforts. Now, I'm not sure that those words mean an awful lot to girls like Kira Bell. NHS England rightly commissioned the Cass review in 2020 amid concerns that there was scarce and inconclusive evidence to support clinical decision-making, which saw children as young as 10 given puberty blockers. There's now going to be a review conducted into their effects. Dr Cass's review is ongoing and the final report is due in 2023. So I say, folks, who knows what else this report is going to find? And I say that in seeking to pander to wackery and wokery and identity politics, we've said to hell with the mental health support and ushered in an era of automatic affirmation of gender ID ideology. Adolescence is difficult. For some, it's hell. It's said that 90% of children who start on puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones, eventually maybe even getting surgeries like mastectomies. But I say to hell with political correctness. In my opinion, it's an outrage that some adults have allowed this to happen and only now accepted the need for a review. That's why free speech is so very important. It's why an honest debate is so important, so that we can reach the best possible conclusions about complex topics, just like this one. Now, folks, last night, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak appeared in Leeds in front of 1,500 Tory activists in the first of 12 hustings for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss defended the government's approach to the war in Ukraine, and former Chancellor Rishi Sunak said he would bring back grammar schools and take tough action on illegal immigration. The Truss campaign received a boost last night when Defence Secretary Ben Wallace announced he was backing her. Here are the reasons he set out this morning.
What you see is what you get. I've sat next to her. She has experience. She was everything from the nation's bookkeeper. She was the Chief Secretary of the Treasury for nearly 2 years in the Treasury. She was, at DEFRA, that's the Farming and Environment Brief. She's been the International Trade Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. She's got a lot of experience. Whoever is going to be the next Prime Minister needs experience, and they need to cover both the threats abroad and the economy at home. She's the only candidate that can do both.
But what do voters make of the race to be the UK's next Prime Minister? Are the public wowed by any of these candidates? Some of you have got in touch and said it's Robo-Rishi and Lifeless Liz. Are the candidates talking about the issues that actually matter to you? And are the Labour Party the real winners from this Tory infighting? Well, joining me now to unpack these questions is Martin Baxter, CEO of Electoral Calculus. Thank you, Martin, for your time today. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, who ultimately, as of last night, do you think is coming up and smelling of roses?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? So Liz Truss is probably ahead, but I think people are getting a bit ahead of themselves to say that she's a surefire thing at this stage, that it's hard to tell, that the Conservative membership is a group that's a bit difficult to poll. People have tried their best to do polling, and that seems to suggest she's maybe a bit ahead there. Another thing we can look at is the betting markets, where people are waging their own money on it. And they have Liz Truss well ahead, but equally they've been very volatile in the campaign so far. They've had Ben Wallace well ahead, they've had Penny Mordaunt well ahead, so they're not necessarily a golden source of predictive information there. My personal take is I think Liz Truss probably is a bit ahead, but there's still quite a lot to play for. And that the issues of the economy will probably be the dominant ones as we go through this campaign.
Martin, what is your forgive me if I'm wrong, but you have actually conducted some polling yourself. When we actually look to the wider country, which candidate is ahead with actual voters who will ultimately decide the next election?
When we had a last look, it was Rishi Sunak was ahead of Liz Truss with voters and Conservative voters as well, which is a sort of another proxy that you can use to get an idea of Conservative opinion. But another important poll we did, as you mentioned in your intro, is we compared both of them against the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. We asked people how they would vote hypothetically under each of the leadership of Sunak and Truss. And the bad news for the Conservatives is that both would lose quite badly. That the Conservatives are possibly drifting into a situation where they've got rid of the proven election winner that was Boris Johnson without having another proven election winner to take his place. And that, as you said, neither candidate's enthusing the general public to a very great extent. And this is in a big contrast to what we saw 2 years ago when Boris Johnson was a candidate. The meter sort of went off the dial when we put Boris Johnson's name in front of people. He had very high name recognition, very high positives at that time, and we're not seeing the same thing for the two candidates now. They don't do very much for the Conservative brand. They don't kind of make it worse, but they don't really make it better. And the Conservatives are behind in the polls, and so it's possible that the winner of this campaign is only going to be in post for a fairly short time.
Well, indeed. But Martin, explain to my viewers, why is there a clamber? Why do people actually want higher interest rates?
So that's an interesting one. We've had a lot of talk about the fiscal policy, how much taxes and spending should be. Monetary policy has not been talked about so much, but economists are beginning to suggest that low interest rates over a long time is a bad idea and it hurts growth in the economy. So we decided to ask people, see what they thought. And on the whole, over the whole general public, more people than not thought the rate should be higher rather than lower. They thought it should be up around 2%. But over Conservative voters, there was marked support for higher interest rates. Most Conservative voters, over 50%, thought that interest rates should be higher. And of the people who thought they should be higher, they thought it should be around 3%. So that'd be 1.75% up from where they are now. So I think that chimes in with a lot of people's intuitive sense that interest rates should give savers some reward for saving. At the moment, with inflation around 9% and interest rates at 1%, there's a big tax on your savings. You're losing 8% a year. People think that's wrong. Some economists are beginning to say that that's a bad idea as well. So it'll be interesting to see if both Sunak and Truss obviously are looking around for policies which are attractive to Conservative voters. Raising interest rates might be one of those policies. Strange.
Well, indeed.
Rishi Sunak seems to have set his face against it at the moment, but we'll have to see. It is a potential vote-winning policy.
OK, Martin, we'll leave it there. But that was Martin Baxter from the Electoral Calculus. Thank you very much for your time and expertise shining a light on that poll in there. We're going to take a short break now, but when we return, as energy prices could rise to 4,000 quid a year, I'll be asking, what could governments have done to avoid this energy crisis?
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GBNews, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's just gone 10:23 and this is To The Point with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We're live on your telly, online and radio this morning. Yesterday we covered the dramatic warnings that electricity bills could reach up to 4,000 bills. Many people are struggling to pay their bills, gas and electric. But why are we, the United Kingdom, one of the richest countries in the world, in a position where people cannot afford to pay their bills, choosing between heating and eating? Is it right that oil and energy companies make mega bucks in profits whilst this happens? Could things have been very different indeed? It's clear that big infrastructure decisions haven't been made over decades, whether that's investment in these new green technologies, new nuclear technologies, or fracking for shale gas. Well, here to talk more about this in detail is Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Andy, thank you very much for your company. On that point of the lack of scrutiny of these policies over years and years now, it strikes me that energy policy is just one of those cans that gets kicked down the road, where people say, oh, well, we're going green, we'll worry about it later, it's all going to be fine. Is that now catching up with us?
That's exactly right. So the chickens are coming home to roost and it's looking really ugly. The situation we're facing this winter, with bills potentially of £400 to £500 per month on average, means that people will not be able to pay them. The government is going to have to kick in with a new welfare system to cover this short-term supply crisis, we hope, but it could linger possibly for 1 or 2 years if they don't make the right decisions now. And it is about supply. So the only sustained way to get energy bills down in the long run is by building more stuff. It doesn't really matter what stuff, provided it all works when you fit it together. So gas is vital. We've got a gas supply crisis globally. The only solution to that is more gas. And the decisions that the government has taken in the last decade to deliberately throttle the North Sea, to put a ban on fracking onshore, means that we are in a terrible position when where we should be is as a supplier to the rest of Europe. We could be helping Germany today to fight Vladimir Putin. Instead, we're in the position we are begging the Belgians to bail us out in the middle of summer. Now, by winter, if we haven't got moving on that, it's going to be even worse.
Yeah.
Everybody's after the same supplies.
So, Andy, I fully agree with you on both of those points, but many of my viewers will be looking at the news reports on the energy companies making these vast profits and actually growing quite fat on this energy crisis. Is that just? Is that right? Should we not nationalise these key industries?
Well, if nationalisation was a solution to anything, then we'd be looking at all of the things today that are run by politicians and thinking that's fantastic. And the NHS, best health system in the world, well, clearly it isn't. We'd be looking at the national grid and saying they've done a brilliant job of getting ready for the green energy transition, and frankly, they haven't. And so it goes on. I mean, if you could imagine Grant Shapps running Shell, do we think he'd be doing a better job of getting more oil and gas on the grid, or would he be spending all of his time making excuses for the fact that he can't deal with strikers? I think it's self-evident that nationalisation is no solution whatsoever. It's just a sticking plaster populist policy that, to be clear, when Jeremy Corbyn stuck it as his major idea for that election in which he didn't do very well, what happened was that people pointed out very quickly that he would have to spend billions of pounds of taxpayers' money buying these companies. And that would then be going either on taxes or on bills. So the short-term effect of nationalisation is to make the cost of living crisis much, much worse.
Yeah, but Andy, there is a hell of a lot of opposition. Both the candidates have said, yep, I'm for fracking, as long as local communities, local areas are for it. But you see, we've discussed on this show many times before the fact that there are movements against building new homes, there are movements against fracking in areas. You're not going to be able to actually get support from the country for these measures, are you?
Yeah, I agree with you to a point. I mean, it would be lovely to believe that the thing that's stopping people approving new housing developments is simply that they're not getting enough personal benefit from it. But in reality, we all know that NIMBY campaigns are irrational. People oppose the opening of a bag of crisps where I live in Surrey, let alone fracking, let alone solar farms, let alone wind farms and nuclear power stations. So there is things the government could do in line with this new idea of community consent. If we look at the fracking regime that should have happened, in it was built a £100,000 incentive for each new site and a 1% community benefit levy, which probably would have gone to the local council. Well, we know the industry will let that rise and to get things moving. And what could happen is that money could be distributed directly to people to reduce their bills or for whatever other purpose they like. So if we apply that from fracking to all of the energy technologies, let's have something similar for new wind farms. Let's have it for solar farms. Let's have it for nuclear power stations. Let the community benefit. And then maybe you'll see communities that really want to have that benefit adopt these schemes.
But then, as far as supply is concerned right now, in this moment, you're right that I think the industries like North Sea, oil and gas, they must have whiplash, Andy, at the breakneck speed at which the government have done a complete reversal on their policies, which have been pretty anti these industries, where we're being told that, you know, net zero is rolling down the tracks and don't worry, love, we'll power your gas boiler through these wind turbines. It's just not possible. So do you think these industries actually, whilst we lambast them for the profits and things that they make, they actually don't know whether they're coming or going?
Well, I think the lambast them is a cheap shot from politicians normally who are just trying to make themselves popular through other people's misery. What we need these companies to do is invest in new sources of supply. So Centrica, for example, was in the press this week for their profits. They're investing potentially £2 billion in the Rough field for gas storage. And they're doing so on the basis that could then be converted into hydrogen storage, which is essential if we want intermittent wind power to actually be backed up. Now, do we want them using that £2 billion to do that? Or do we want them giving cash handouts to their customers? I think there's a very clear answer to that.
But Andy, a lot of people are saying, well, hang on, if you look at fossil fuels, the cost of fossil fuels, and you compare that with renewable technologies like wind, like solar, that actually the new technologies, the green technologies, are cheaper right now than the fossil fuels. So why shouldn't we be going hell for leather on those things?
Well, we should always be going hell for leather on a fair carbon price and then letting the technologies fight it out with each other. What we shouldn't be doing, and particularly not politicians, is picking winners, or more often in energy, picking losers. So the nuclear power decisions, for example, if we look at Hinkley Point, it's a disaster. It's going to cost 68 to 120 billion pounds, according to the government's own estimates. That's not affordable. And the new Sizewell C plant that's been approved, same technology, the same technology which is rusting in France and caused the company that's behind it to be bailed out by the French government. Why on earth are we doing that? So what we should be doing instead is saying, OK, we think it's fair to tackle climate change, that the carbon price is something like what it is in the system at the moment, which is about £80 per tonne of CO2, or whatever the figure is. And anything that's more expensive than that, we're not going to build it. Fossil fuels are perfectly capable of covering the gap in the interim. This temporary supply shock will be overcome. But it is also a result of deliberate policy to restrict supply. So the only thing we can do in the short term is import more fossil fuels. And everybody's trying to do that at the moment. You see Macron hosting Saudi Arabia this week, for example. So
even President Biden, of course, he was saying 2 minutes ago, he was saying he wouldn't have anything to do with the Saudis. And now, of course, he's courting them, you know, like Cinderella trying to find her slipper.
Yeah, ethical foreign policy is often a casualty of reality. And in reality, we need the oil and gas. And we're going to need it for 20 to 30 years in any sort of low-carbon transition strategy. Well, let's make sure that we're profiting from that. We have some of the best resources of oil and gas in the world. We can be helping our near neighbours. We need to drill it now. We need to get the regulations out of the way. We need to streamline permitting. It's not either or with the renewables, it's both. And let's have them working together so one offsets the other.
So, Andy, the Labour Party have said that net zero is at the heart of any economic policy that they would implement in government. Now, I'm wondering, is it your view that actually an economic policy that pursues net zero is ultimately one that's going to lead us to be both colder and poorer?
I think you've got to separate two things. There's mundane net zero, the science, which is to arrest global warming, you need net zero emissions. Yeah, that's obvious. And then there's net zero, the ideology, which is where Labour and some Conservatives have gone, which is we must achieve net zero in the United Kingdom, regardless of what the rest of the world do, at any cost. That's mad. And what that means is we are paying here for other people to emit carbon elsewhere. And that's got to stop. The reality of the situation is no government is going to jeopardise security of supply to hit the net zero target. No government is going to force a cost of living crisis on us for a sustained period to hit the net zero target. That's the honest position. The politicians should start saying it and stop pandering to teenage activists and people lobbying for particular technologies with all this ridiculous ideology.
Well, Andy, I mean, you know that I agree with you completely on this stuff, and I just really, really hope that actually, whilst this crisis, I think, is going to lead to a lot of people really feeling the pinch, and we are not prepared for the seismic, I think, proportions of that crisis. But I do hope that actually we now start to realise that the writing's on the wall and that actually not pursuing these policies that have led to us being ultimately poorer and colder, I think is not a sensible one for any government to ultimately end up pursuing. But Andy Mayer, we'll end it there. Thank you very much. Andy Mayer there from the Institute of Economic Affairs, a good friend of the show. Now, folks, according to the UK's Ministry of Defence, Ukraine's attacks on Russian-occupied Kherson in the south of the country are gaining momentum. This is as President Zelensky's forces attempt to retake the region and other territories occupied by Russian forces. So are we starting to see a shift in how the war is being conducted? And are Putin's troops on the back foot? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Ukrainian MP, Alexei, I cannot say that, I beg your pardon, Alexei Goncharenko. I will get there, Alexei, I promise. Thank you for your company.
Thank you very much.
Now, Alexei, we've had the news that 100,000 Ukrainian civilians were welcomed to safety in the UK. It's really something that I think we can be proud of since the start of Russia's invasion. How do you respond to that?
Thank you very much. Thank you to people for all support we are receiving and for hosting our refugees. We rather call them externally displaced people because these people want to come back home. They are not coming to the UK or other European countries to live there. They're coming there because they don't have the possibility to stay in Ukraine because their cities are occupied or their houses are destroyed, but they want to come back as soon as possible. And we are very thankful for all support we are receiving. Polish people, French, German, and British people who are opening doors of their houses to these people whom they didn't knew before war. And that is very human. And that shows that we have these values, and the West in general has these values, which makes us human.
About Kherson, then, this counterattack, does this suggest that, you know, this because it was perceived as being a war that was very much a slam dunk for Russia at the start, that actually Russia would just storm through Ukraine and take what they want? That's clearly not the case. Tell us about this counterattack.
Yeah, Ukraine is active in the south, and I represent Odessa, which is the biggest city in the southern part of Ukraine. I am often on the front line, and I can tell you that in reality, Ukrainian counteroffensive is slow but constant, and it happens already for several weeks. Yeah, we are thanks for new weaponry that we received, also to MLRS we received from the United Kingdom. These systems, we can disrupt Russian logistics in the depth. And after this, we can push them from the front line, what we are doing. And yes, we have successes. We are now coming closer to the city of Kherson itself. And I think that we have chances to kick off Russians from the right bank part of Dnieper River side of Kherson region, including the city of Kherson itself, which will have a big symbolic and strategic meaning, because that is the only regional center which is for the moment occupied by Russians.
We're just going to take a short break because we're having some audio issues there, so I do apologise, and I apologise to actually our listeners there as well. But when we return, we'll be live in Boston for that press conference, folks.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News.
A murder investigation has been launched after a 9-year-old girl was killed in the small town of Boston in Lincolnshire. A press conference is taking place now.
We believe this to be an isolated incident, and we're pursuing extensive lines of inquiry and have committed a number of resources to this investigation. You'll see more officers patrolling the area, and we have a high number of specialist detectives who've been brought in to assist the investigation. As I've said, we do believe this to be an isolated incident, and we're not yet in a position to name the victim. Her parents are being supported by specially trained officers at this very difficult time, and I can only imagine the pain that they're going through. Their welfare and the welfare of those who she knew is a priority for us. We would ask the media to respect the family's rights to privacy at this difficult time. We would also ask that people refrain from speculating on social media on what is a desperately sad situation and also a live investigation. Both the public, the police and her family will want this investigation to hold those responsible to account. If people do have information, then I would appeal for any witnesses or people who may have been in the area at the time or people who may have dashcam footage to contact the police on 101, quoting incident 419 of the 28th of July 2022. Similarly, people can report via Crime Stoppers if they have any information that they believe would assist this investigation. Any information, no matter how small, could be key in ensuring justice for this child. Similarly, whilst we have more officers out in the local area to reassure the community, if you have any issues or concerns, please do approach your local neighbourhood policing teams. The area is currently being cordoned off and will remain cordoned off whilst our scenes of crime officers gather all of the necessary evidence. This incident has shocked our community in Boston, and I'd like to reassure the community that we're doing absolutely everything we can to progress the investigation and to support the family. Thank you.
Do you have the issues and sexes for the...
I'm just going to hold that there. Sorry, we're going to call everyone forward for one-to-ones. Thank you, Kate. If you could speak with Jess Lane from BBC, Look North first, and then I'll call everybody forward individually. Thank you.
They're taking place now. I believe questions are about to be answered. We'll bring you more when we get that. Harrowing stuff, an absolutely terrible story. And I do apologise to anyone distressed by that story because there is nothing in this world more tragic than the loss. Oh, we're just going to go back to that press conference right now. I think we can hear some questions being answered.
Snappers. Sorry. Just get you out the back a bit. Thank you.
Oh, is it on the website? Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
What more can you tell us about the 9-year-old girl?
At this moment in time, we're respecting the wishes of the family and those who are investigating at this moment in time by not releasing her details. Obviously, as and when we can, we will do, but our priority at the moment really is on supporting the family, supporting those who knew her, and trying to identify the offender from this and bringing them to justice. And that's why we're appealing for members of the public who do have information or who might have been in the area at take the time to report, quoting the incident number, or directly through Crime Stoppers if they don't feel able to do that to the police directly.
And you said there have been 2 arrests made. Can you tell us any more about those arrests?
As you can appreciate, it's a live ongoing investigation, and for the integrity of the investigation there's only so much that I can tell people, but what I can offer is the reassurance that we're putting our very best detectives on this, that we have a number of local neighbourhood officers out speaking to members of the community, and we do have dedicated resources focusing all of their efforts on bringing the offender to justice.
Have they been arrested on suspicion of murder? What can you tell us about any charges that you might be able to bring?
So at this moment in time it would be too early to speculate on what charges may or may not be brought. What I would say is that we're absolutely committed to finding those people who are responsible and holding them to account.
Are you confident you have found the people involved, or are there more people? Because obviously people in Boston are scared. They're worried that there's someone out there with a knife who's gone around stabbing people.
And we'd like to offer reassurance to the people in Boston that actually this is an incredibly safe community within Lincolnshire. It is an area where we have a lot of people who really are focusing their time on trying to reduce crime. We know that there have been some incidents in the past where sadly this might mean that the community are more concerned about what has happened, and I can only sympathise with that really and empathise with the impact that must be having on people and with the family as well themselves.
Thanks, Jess. I'm sorry I have to move it along. Kate, next, please.
Hi, Fraser from Sky News. So, first of all, just can you give any more details about the 2 people who've been arrested, their sexes, their ages?
I'm afraid I can't at the moment because of the investigation's obviously ongoing. We have a number of lines of inquiries that are actively pursuing at this moment in time. And I think what we want as the police, and obviously what the community will want, is for the people that are responsible to be held to account. So the integrity of the investigation, obviously only sharing the information that we can do, is really, really important for us at this moment in time.
Are you looking for anyone else at the moment in connection with this?
So we're still pursuing a number of lines of inquiries. We're open-minded about what might have happened, but we still do think that there's more information the public could give us in terms of what's happened, and that's why we're really appealing for witnesses in terms of if they've been in the area at the time that it's happened, they might have been driving through and might have dash cam footage. It's so important that they share that information with us by calling us on 101, or if they don't feel able, by reporting anonymously via Crime Stoppers.
I know it's very early stages, but is there any indication at the moment as to any potential motive behind this attack?
Like I say, at the moment it's very early, and I wouldn't want to speculate on that. What I will say is that once we have more information that we're able to share, that we will do.
Thank you. I'll have to move it on.
Which communities the victim and the arrested people are from? We understand that the victim may well be Lithuanian. Is that correct?
So at this moment in time, we've been asked to protect the identity of the victim and respect the wishes of the family. Once we have more information that we can share, we will do. And at this moment in time, our focus really is on identifying the offender, bringing them to justice, and making sure we're giving the right support for the family.
Thank you. And Kate, if you could do Radio Lincolnshire next, thank you.
Hi, Beth Bishard, Radio Lincolnshire. So what can you tell us? Is it definitely murder that you're investigating, or perhaps a charge of manslaughter?
So at this moment in time we are investigating it as a murder. We do have specialists from our regional major crime unit who are supporting that, who are really the specialists in terms of murder investigation. We have a number of resources from neighbouring forces that are supporting that, and we are treating it with the utmost seriousness as a murder investigation.
And there isn't currently a really heavy police crime scene investigation presence at the moment. Have they sort of found what they need, or are they coming back?
So what I will say is that people have been working on this tirelessly throughout the night. We are a 24/7 service, so throughout the night we have had people dedicated on the scene. We've had people dedicated on the investigation, on identifying those people who are responsible. We've been doing that throughout the night as well. So I appreciate at the moment there might not be scenes of crime officers here, but absolutely they have been leading this, working through the night, working tirelessly alongside the investigations teams and neighbourhood officers as well.
And what do you need from the public at this moment?
So what we really need from the public at this moment is that we want to find out any information they hold. So they might have been in the area around 6:20 yesterday afternoon, evening. They might have been driving through, so they might have footage on dash cam, or they might have been taking photos in the area that might have really important information for the police. So what we want those people to do is to call us on 101 and to report that information to us. If they don't feel able to do so, they can do it through Crime Stoppers and report anonymously, and we can take reports from people in any languages as well, so don't feel that those things are a barrier to you. If you have information, no matter how small, if you think it might help, please do report it to us.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you. We'll go to LBC next, thank you.
Thanks. Can I just ask you to step a little closer? So,
Swing the camera round. Okay. All right. Kiss is caught.
Absolutely harrowing scenes and actually reporting there from Boston about this suspected stabbing of a 9-year-old girl who was being found dead. Absolutely horrendous things, and I do apologise to anyone who finds that disturbing. Who wouldn't, folks? It's a suspected stabbing there. Now, the electric car series Formula E is returning to the capital. 22 drivers are going to battle it out for victory, and GBNews got exclusive broadcast access to the track as they were setting up at the Excel Centre in East London. With the capital's drive to lower emissions, what role does Formula One play in making London greener? Well, our reporter, Alice Porter, went out to find out.
Down into turn 10. London's historic Dockland is being transformed into the world's first indoor and outdoor racetrack, with all cars powered by electricity. We got a sneak peek behind the scenes from Charlie Harbord in Formula E.
It's a real logistical challenge, bringing all these different parts together and making sure everything's at the right place at the right time. We've been working at this site for nearly about 2 weeks. We've got over 2 miles worth of track, which needs to have their safety barriers either side. It all needs to be totally checked over.
The government plans to ban sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. So is London's future electric? Sustainability Director Julia Powell thinks so.
We are actually here in Newham Borough, which is the most polluted borough of London. And the reason why it's extremely important to have Formula E here in Excel is actually to showcase that there's a very concrete solution to improving the air quality levels that we all breathe in our cities. And electric vehicles from the mobility angle is a very concrete and direct solution.
There are a number of challenges with electric cars, for example, how you charge them, what sources you're using to charge vehicles. What exactly are Formula E doing to sort of address that issue?
The cars that we race are always powered with renewable energy, and that's how you can get to a carbon emission reduction through the entire life by 50 to 80% on the passenger cars that you and I will be driving.
London has had a big drive towards lowering emissions. Mayor for London, Sadiq Khan, brought in the ultra-low emission zone last year and is looking to expand it even further. And Formula E is one way of making electric cars cool.
I'm really excited that Formula E is coming back to London, coming back to the East End of London. The innovation, that technology is really exciting, but it's also environmentally friendly.
But are electric cars as green as people think? The problem is that there are more carbon emissions made during the production of electric vehicles than petrol or diesel cars. Volvo did a study which suggested you'd have to own an electric vehicle for 9 years before it was greener than a diesel or petrol car. But that would decrease significantly if you were able to guarantee that you'd be charging your electric car from more renewable sources. And with electric technology developing so quickly, it's becoming easier to make electric cars more sustainable.
Next year, we will launch the new generation of our car, which is a car that is faster, more powerful, but also more sustainable. Everything has been thought through from the design till the end of life to make sure that everything will be more sustainable and everything will be recycled at the end of the life of the car.
Tickets for the weekend are a fraction of the cost of Formula One, making it more accessible for motor enthusiasts. With London aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050, the journey to get there will undoubtedly be electric. Alice Porter, GB News.
Thanks to Alice Porter there for that report. Now, folks, zooming right into Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. They're going to find out who has won their libel case when the High Court rules later on today. Colleen Rooney posted back in October 2019, for those of you that have forgotten, that Rebecca Vardy had been leaking stories about her to the press in an Instagram story that ended up going viral. Mrs Vardy sued Mrs Rooney for the claims, which she has consistently denied. Joining us now to discuss this and how the trial has got to this point is the showbiz reporter, Ellie Phillips. Ellie, thank you for your company. Could you just give us a recap of the details of the case?
So essentially what happened was, like you said, Colleen conducted this investigation, this sleuthing, where she set up a sting operation to essentially, what she claims, is catch Rebecca Vardy in a trap of leaking stories about her to the Sun. So she placed 3 fake stories on her private Instagram account, which only has a couple of hundred people on there. It's completely locked down. These stories subsequently ended up in the Sun, and time after time, it was only Rebecca Vardy's Instagram account who was able to view these stories, which is how Colleen says that she found out that all of this information was coming from Rebecca. Rebecca denied this when she was outed by Colleen in a really dramatic Instagram post where she alleged that it was Rebecca Vardy's Instagram account that had seen all of this information, and it was no one else that could have leaked these stories. And following on from that, Rebecca Vardy decided that she wanted to prove her innocence and sue Colleen, which is when the trial began. This all actually started many years ago, 3 years ago now. And then the trial took place, a 9-day trial took place in May. And what's happening today is at midday, Mrs. Justice will decide and will announce, what the outcome is, whether Colleen is right in doing what she did, and actually, no, it was Rebecca Vardy's account that leaked information, or that Rebecca Vardy's proven her innocence and that Colleen is in the wrong. So it's all culminated in this. And what's really sad about all of this is there's been huge coverage of this case, the Battle of the Wags, Wagatha Christie, and actually the announcement, the decision is simply going to be posted online. There isn't going to be this, day in court where the verdict is announced. It's literally going to be put online some point around midday, and we'll find out who is the winner of this WAG trial.
In the show, we're going to be talking about court cases being, the decision of court cases actually being streamed. So I guess we're all absolutely desperate for that in this case, aren't we? But Ellie,
honestly, I would totally be there with my popcorn watching this one.
I think we all would. Ellie, what are the sums of money? What are the sums of money or repercussions actually at stake here?
Yeah, so we're looking at £3 million, more or less, has been spent on lawyers. This is just the legal fees to do with this, because both WAGs went for absolute top dog lawyers who represent massive celebrities in huge trials. And they decided they wanted this to fight out this Instagram story outing. So that's where the money's gone. And what's actually the silliest thing about all of this is that the maximum that if Rebecca Vardy is proven innocent and, it said Colleen owes an apology and is going to be sued because of this, that the maximum she'll actually get is around £70,000 and the lower end £15,000, because that's where it's being capped. So no matter what's happened here, the ultimate winner are definitely the legal teams with these fees. But I think ultimately what Rebecca Vardy's hoping for is the apology that Colleen could be made to give her in court should, this go her way and Rebecca Vardy be vindicated in all of this. And then if not, that's literally it. Colleen's won, the end. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. And I don't think it's actually going to end here. As much as some people who aren't into the showbiz world were like, oh, thank God at midday it's all over. Actually, we know that Colleen signed a deal with Netflix to do a documentary around this. Rebecca Vardy has reportedly signed up to do a lot of interviews on the back of this, paid for interviews on television and newspapers and things like that. So this isn't going away anytime soon.
No, Ellie, but we'll be sure to get you back on to give us the latest on all of it, because as you say, it's not going away anytime soon, folks. So that was the showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips there giving us an update on Wagatha Christie. Now, folks, we're going to go to a quick break and find out what the weather's up to.
Hello and welcome to your forecast. Well, we've got a lot of warm weather over the next few days, some sunshine around through the course of today, but also the risk of a few showers. But as I say, it'll be pretty warm out there. Now, we've got high pressure centred to the Azores and also over Scandinavia. The UK being in between. Not many isobars means those winds are light, and that adds to that warm and humid feel that we'll be seeing over the next couple of days. Now, through the rest of Friday morning into the early afternoon, we've got some heavier rain affecting northern parts of England, but this will tend to break up into showers and they'll stretch up across many northern parts of England and also eastern Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, but elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, the best of this towards the south, and with very light winds and strong sunshine, we'll see highs of 25, perhaps to 28 degrees Celsius. And it stays warm and humid through this evening. Most of the showers fade away, but then we do see this weather front pushing in across western Scotland, getting into Northern Ireland, northwest Wales and the far north of England as well. Some quite heavy rain through the night here, but it stays dry further south with some clear spells, but a very warm night to come. Temperatures in the mid-teens nationwide. So with that warm and grey start for many through the morning, a bit of a disappointing start to the weekend across many northern and western areas. Best of any sunshine across southern areas, but the cloud will start to thicken here through the day as well, so skies turning a bit grey. But I am hopeful for a few breaks developing for East Wales and southwestern England through the afternoon. Still very warm and humid, and the heaviest of the rain starts to ease, so we will see some brighter skies coming in for Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. It stays quite wet for North Wales and parts of Cumbria into Lancashire through the course of Saturday evening, and then we do see some mist and murk developing across those western facing coasts and hills. A quick look to Sunday then, more in the way of showers and some rain through southern areas, brighter in the north and staying warm. Take care.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, welcome back to The Point on GB News with me, Darren Grimes, on your telly, radio and online. We're with you until midday with a show jam-packed with all of today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, expert guests and our opinions as well as yours. Make sure you get in touch with us with your views as usual on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting through all of those throughout the show, but first, it's time for the latest news.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Here are the headlines. In the last few minutes, Lincolnshire police have said that 2 people have been arrested in connection with the death of a 9-year-old girl who died from suspected stab wounds in Boston. Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White is at the scene for us. And Mark, just bring us up to date with what we know so far.
Yeah, this was a statement from Chief Superintendent Kate Anderson, the East Area Commander at Lincolnshire Police, and a very significant development news that 2 people have been arrested in connection with the murder of this 9-year-old girl who was found with a stab injury or stab injuries at 6:20 last night. I'm just going to pop out of the camera for a second to give you a shot there. Down towards the scene, there is a silver small forensic tent that is over the spot where we believe that this young victim was found in the early evening yesterday. Some yellow forensic markers all around there as well. And just in the last half an hour, a white van has pulled up which has more of those forensic teams inside. I don't know if Paul, our cameraman, can give you a shot of that. They are setting up, it seems, with a view to putting up a larger forensic tent over the crime scene itself. These forensic teams were here overnight and, as I say, now have returned to continue that very painstaking, methodical forensic examination as they try to piece together all of the clues surrounding the death of this young girl. Now, the Chief Superintendent said in her news conference that she wasn't able to give us any more details on the age or the sex of the two people that were arrested in connection with the death of the 9-year-old girl, but she did say significantly that she believes that it was an isolated incident, that there is no wider threat to the community, but no details really on what time these people were arrested, whether it was last night or this morning, or indeed whether they are looking for any other people and there may be some more arrests in the hours ahead. But a very significant development just broken in the last few minutes from Chief Superintendent Kate Anderson here at Lincolnshire Police in Boston, saying that 2 people have now been arrested in connection with the murder of this 9-year-old girl.
OK, Mark, for now, thank you very much. Mark White reporting there. Former police officer Wayne Couzens has lost his Court of Appeal bid to reduce his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. The Court of Appeal has been reviewing the sentences of 5 killers and ruled in Couzens' case a sentencing judge was entitled to impose a whole life order because of the way he had abused his power as a police officer. Liz Truss's campaign for number 10 has received the support of the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. It comes after the first official hustings in Leeds last night, in which Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak appeared before Conservative Party members. Speaking to GB News, Ben Wallace explained why he's backing the Foreign Secretary.
What you see is what you get. I've sat next to her. She has experience. She was everything from the nation's bookkeeper. She was the Chief Secretary of the Treasury for nearly 2 years in the Treasury. She was, at DEFRA, that's the Farming and Environment Brief. She's been the International Trade Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. She's got a lot of experience. Whoever is going to be the next Prime Minister needs experience, and they need to cover both the threats abroad and the economy at home. She's the only candidate that can do both.
In last night's hustings, Rishi Sunak acknowledged that he is trailing Liz Truss, but one of his supporters, Damien Hines, told GB News that people are persuaded to back the former Chancellor once they meet him.
People I'm speaking to, I hear repeatedly that they see Rishi Sunak as the right candidate, the right character to bring us through this, to deliver a bright future, a Conservative future, to win that historic 5th general election, but crucially, along the way, to get the economy back on track, to deal with the cost of living crisis we've got. And he's the candidate with the character, with the experience, with the determination and the vision to do that.
The AA has issued its first amber traffic warning for significant congestion for today and tomorrow. It says the worst of the traffic will be between 11 a.m, just about now, and 3 p.m, fuelled by the school holidays, a rail strike and the Commonwealth Games. Roads to Dover and the Eurotunnel, along with those that lead to Devon and Cornwall, are expected to be very busy. A £400 discount on energy bills will be paid in 6 monthly instalments from October. The support for all households was announced by the Chancellor in May. It comes as the energy price cap is expected to rise to at least £3,500 in October. The footballers' wives involved in the so-called Wagatha Christie case will find out who's won their libel claim when the High Court rules later today. Rebecca Vardy sued Colleen Rooney after she accused her on social media of leaking stories to the press. Mrs. Rooney defended the claim on the basis that it was substantially true. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, let's return to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Darren Grimes, on your telly, radio and online. We've got a great show lined up to kickstart your day. So here's what's on the menu. Last night, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss laid out their plans for Britain's future at the first Tory leadership hustings in Leeds. The former Chancellor said he would support the return of grammar schools, while Liz Truss promised to revive Northern powerhouse rail. But should their campaigns be more focused around protecting families? The NHS is set to close the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic after a review criticised its approach and operational capacity. New regional centres are being considered to address these issues, but we'll get more details from our social affairs editor later in the show. And we'll be live in Birmingham following the stunning opening of the Commonwealth Games. The ceremony included the reveal of a huge mechanical bull celebrating the city's deep connection to Britain's industrial past. We'll have the latest on what to expect from today's events. All of that and much, much more across the programme. As ever, though, your views are much more important than mine. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. As I say, last night, the Conservative hopefuls for Prime Minister appeared in Leeds in front of 1,500 grassroots activists at the first official Conservative leadership hustings. It's one of 12 pretty grueling stuff. Rishi Sunak said he would support the return of grammar schools, and Liz Truss promised to revive Northern powerhouse rail. One topic that hasn't been given the prominence that some think it deserves, and my next guest certainly does, in many of the Tory leadership debates so far, is the importance of family. So joining me in the studio is Lord Farmer. Lord Farmer is a member of the House of Lords, former Treasurer of the Conservative Party and a GB News investor. Lord Farmer, thank you very much for your company.
Pleasure.
Now, Lord Farmer, Rishi trailing Liz Truss in the polls, if we believe the polls anymore. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think if we believe the polls anymore, I think it's fairly early days, and this is a month-long election campaign. As you said earlier, we have 12 hustings. We need more information coming out. I mean, people decide to vote on the information they're receiving. We've only really had one or two events up till now, and early polling can be very misleading.
Yeah.
So personally, you mentioned families, but I think that hasn't been mentioned up till now, and it could well become quite an issue in this whole election.
Because, Lord Farmer, forgive me if I'm wrong, but actually I think a lot of people watching this may well be of the view that conservatism, instead of being rooted in family and community, is actually rooted in selfishness, some may say, individual being king, you know, the individual before community and family and all of these other things. Has conservatism, because of Thatcherism maybe, because of Margaret Thatcher, lost that sense of the identity of community and all the rest of it?
Yes, I wouldn't say because of Margaret Thatcher. I would agree with you that I think, frankly, since the Blair years particularly, there has been an emphasis on the freedom of the individual. So we have liberal individualism, if you like, at the cost of neglect of the family. And if you look at the OECD nations, there's 37 of them. We languish down the bottom in the 30s on a lot of family breakdown measurements. For instance, at the age of 15, I think in the OECD, 84% of children live with both parents. With us, it's only 66%.
Wow.
You know, it's quite a big decline. And there are other statistics like that showing that we've neglected the family. We haven't had family as an active, constructive policy.
Yeah, because on everything from childcare costs, access to housing, people are really struggling. And actually some people, Lord Farmer, are saying, I can't afford to have children. I can't afford to raise a family.
Yeah.
Do you think the next Prime Minister has to get serious on those issues? What sort of issues do you think could actually bolster the family?
Well, I mean, here I think we're coming to the difference which has come to light so far between Liz and Rishi, which Liz says that families are important, but we need to review. And what my heart sinks when I hear that, because reviews can take 3 years and anything can happen in 3 years, and in the meantime, nothing much is done. Whereas Rishi has certainly, I think when he first got into government, he was involved with and supporting the Troubled Families programme. And he has actually, as Chancellor, supported family hubs. Now, family hubs are a government initiative now, which we've been supporting for a long time, which are very important. They're being run by local communities, and they will be a hub for services which can support families. It's a non-stigmatizing place where, for instance, I mean, I say sometimes I'm a single mum with a boy she's maybe found white powder in the pocket.
Right.
What does she do?
Yeah.
Do you go to social services? Do you go to the police? Prefer not, frankly. You can go to a family hub and find there a direction of where you can go for some help. Or, for instance, I know there's a MP, Northern MP Conservative, Lee Anderson, who's proposing teaching cooking.
Yes,
instead of, where fresh vegetables are being thrown away because people don't know how to cook.
Well, that's true. But Lord Farmer, when Lee Anderson said this, he was howled down. The people on Twitter and all the rest of it were saying, how dare you? You are so completely out of touch. But actually, there are a lot of people, far too many people, who don't know those basics.
Don't know the basics and actually are eating junk food. So we have a problem with obesity. They have a problem with inflation and the cost of, whatever it is, the burgers, etc., that they're eating. Whereas fresh vegetables, it doesn't take much to learn how to cook them. And it's healthy, and it's actually very good for the family. They eat together.
So what would you say, Lord Farmer, to those people who say, well, hang on a minute, I'm working every hour under the sun, I haven't got time to cook, and all of these other issues?
Well, there are many answers to that. One of the recommendations I've made to government, actually, is front-loading child benefit, where to give the government the option to actually say to families, well, you can pull from the last 3 years, 15 to 18, and use them in the first 3 years, where life is most stressful. You've got babies, you need childcare, you haven't got so many earnings as you have later on.
Yeah, because, Lord Farmer, the restraint now that Rishi Sunak is advocating, the restraint now and tax cuts later, many of your fellow Conservatives may well be of the view that actually what you really need in this post-Brexit moment is someone who's going to actually tackle those things and reduce taxes and give a real Conservative blue streak to government.
Well, we are Conservatives, and actually Conservatives generally have the reputation of being serious and sensible about the economy. And it's always tempting to have tax cuts. And frankly, I think having a tax cut 2 years before the election, spending money now, when we have there's this spectre of inflation to deal with. We need to tackle that seriously. You need to get inflation under control first. You need to be serious about the economy, and then you can give later on when we're in a position to do it. It's like managing your own household budget. We need to do it sensibly. We're Conservatives. So I think Rishi's got exactly the right idea on this.
OK, Lord Farmer, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time and for your views there. I do appreciate your time. That's Lord Farmer there, member of the House of Lords and an investor in GB News. Joining me now for more analysis of and reaction to last night's debate is Kate Andrews, the economics editor at The Spectator. Kate, thank you very much for your company. Now, your piece in The Spectator, in the magazine, this latest magazine, you actually say, as someone who's perhaps been on the Truss train, dare I say, Kate, that actually Trussonomics isn't being serious with people that, like Liz Truss may well have been in the past, being serious about the fact that if you want lower taxes, Kate, guess what? You need a smaller state.
Well, I've never formally jumped on any train, but I talk in this week's magazine about how throughout 2016, 2015, perhaps to just before the pandemic, Liz Truss really developed a reputation for being the darling of the free market right. And she did this by talking about tax cuts and by referencing the tax burden, which at the time was at a near 50-year high, sort of a low tax utopia compared to where we are now. But crucially, she also talked about achieving this, yes, through growing the economy, a very important point, but also through addressing the size of the state. That in order to have sustainable tax cuts, you could not have a state that was ever growing and ever making promises to people that it really couldn't deliver on. And it's very noticeable in this leadership campaign that while Liz Truss remains committed to cutting taxes, and I do applaud her for talking about that, it's a debate long overdue in the Conservative Party. Taxes are far too high, given the fact that the Tories have been in charge for 12 years now. But she has conveniently dropped talk of cutting spending and talk of slashing the state from her bid. And I appreciate that that might be a more difficult way to win over voters, but I think we're entering into a very dangerous period where not even the Conservative Party is talking about fiscal responsibility, not about balancing the books tomorrow, but imagining a world where maybe we could possibly even do that one day, and certainly about the promises we're making to people, especially around healthcare and pensions, what feasibly we can afford in the years and decades to come. And if the Tories aren't going to have that conversation, I fear nobody's going to have that conversation.
OK, and moving on to Rishi Sunak, Kate, actually what Rishi, the platform he purports to be advocating at least, is one of restraint now for your lower taxes later on. We just had Lord Farmer on there, a Conservative peer that's actually supporting Rishi Sunak's platform. What do you make of his economic platform? Is that more in line with the kind of restraint, fiscal restraint that you think is necessary?
I appreciate that he's talking about the very difficult place this country's in when it comes to the public finances. They were bad before COVID and they're catastrophic now. And it is really important that we explain to people that in order to get things back in good standing, more difficult decisions have to be made. There are, of course, criticisms of his agenda. I think when Liz Truss frames him as being slightly more defeatist, that he can't even see these opportunities for tax cuts, she makes a decent point. I think the former chancellor has perhaps painted himself more pessimistic than I think he probably really is about the prospect for tax cuts. You could also point to some of the uncosted spending that he himself has done. The £9 billion support package for energy bills in February, that was costed. The £15 billion support package in April was only partially costed. And he brought in a windfall tax to do that, which I think is fundamentally unconservative. So there are plenty of criticisms of the Rishi Sunak agenda. But I do think he's being slightly more honest. And he said at the very start of this campaign, this is going to be hard for me, but I'm going to say what has to be said, because we cannot pretend that the way that the public finances are going now is in any way sustainable. And he is finding that a hard case to make on the campaign trail. But I'm pleased that somebody's saying it.
Yeah, Kate, we're going to have to leave it there, sadly, but I do appreciate you giving your time and views, and people can check out your latest piece in The Spectator magazine. Thank you. Now, after the break, folks, the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is being closed down after it was criticised in an independent review. So what happens next? We'll be joined by our Culture and Social Affairs editor to bring you the latest. First up, though, here's the weather.
Hello and welcome to your forecast. Well, we've got a lot of warm weather over the next few days, some sunshine around through the course of today, but also the risk of a few showers. But as I say, it'll be pretty warm out there. Now, we've got high pressure centred to the Azores and also over Scandinavia. The UK being in between. Not many isobars means those winds are light, and that adds to that warm and humid feel that we'll be seeing over the next couple of days. Now, through the rest of Friday morning into the early afternoon, we've got some heavier rain affecting northern parts of England, but this will tend to break up into showers and they'll stretch up across many northern parts of England and also eastern Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, but elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, the best of this towards the south, and with very light winds and strong sunshine, we'll see highs of 25, perhaps to 28 degrees Celsius. And it stays warm and humid through this evening. Most of the showers fade away, but then we do see this weather front pushing in across western Scotland, getting into Northern Ireland, northwest Wales and the far north of England as well. Some quite heavy rain through the night here, but it stays dry further south with some clear spells, but a very warm night to come. Temperatures in the mid-teens nationwide. So with that warm and grey start for many through the morning, a bit of a disappointing start to the weekend across many northern and western areas. Best of any sunshine across southern areas, but the cloud will start to thicken here through the day as well, so skies turning a bit grey. But I am hopeful for a few breaks developing for East Wales and southwestern England through the afternoon. Still very warm and humid, and the heaviest of the rain starts to ease, so we will see some brighter skies coming in for Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. It stays quite wet for North Wales and parts of Cumbria into Lancashire through the course of Saturday evening, and then we do see some mist and murk developing across those western-facing coasts and hills. A quick look to Sunday then, more in the way of showers and some rain through southern areas, brighter in the north and staying warm. Take care.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Just gone 11:26, and this is To The Point with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We're live on your telly, online and radio this morning. Now, folks, I'm just going to read out some of your views, much more important than my own. On heating or eating, Nicholas Pye writes in, nobody ever seems to point out that we can reduce our energy bills by turning down the heating without turning it off completely. He says it won't be pleasant, but it's not quite as bad or stark a choice between heating or eating. Nicholas, I'm afraid I disagree. I think for many people it is actually. You know, if you're elderly, for example, and you've always got that heating on, people are really going to struggle, especially this winter. I think we're in for a real wake-up call. I really do. And on energy, sticking to that theme, Peter writes in to say that the government are not giving people anything at all towards their energy bills. What the government are doing is giving energy companies your taxpayer cash. So that's Peter there with a robust statement on energy companies. And actually, I think a lot of you are quite incensed by the profits being made at this time when we're all struggling with these extraordinary bills, generation-defining inflation, and all of the rest of it. On interest rates, Angie says that Russia are to blame. Wheat and other grain costs rise, not only because of Russia's blockage of grain exports, but Russia's forcing up of fuel prices. It doesn't matter how much the Bank of England puts up interest rates to fight against inflation, it won't affect gas, fuel and grain prices. So they stay the same, inflation stays the same. Now, Ian actually warns that France is limiting energy prices to increases to 4%. Can you imagine the riots that would have happened if they had allowed the sort of increases that have been allowed in the UK? Ian raises a good point. We are not the sort of nation, are we, that gets out onto the streets, not like the French anyway. But next up, folks, the NHS. It's shutting down its gender identity clinic for children after a review found that it failed vulnerable under 18s. The Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service clinic has been accused of rushing children into life-altering treatments on puberty blockers. The review also found that other mental health issues were overshadowed when gender was raised by children referred to this clinic. Following its closure next spring, new regional centres will be set up to ensure the holistic needs of patients are fully met. Well, joining me now in the studio is our Culture and Social Affairs editor, Inaya Florin Iman. Inaya, thank you very much for your company today. How do they actually ensure that these new regional centres don't just end up in the same problems that the Tavistock has clearly done?
I think that's a really important question, because with the Tavistock Clinic, it was founded in 1989 in order to respond to a number of young people presenting as gender distress. And originally, when it was founded, overwhelmingly the young people were young boys, were males that were concerned and wanted to potentially transition into being females. But in the last 10 years, we've seen a radical transformation where it's overwhelmingly now young girls that are presenting as gender dysphoric, and it has increased hundreds of fold over the last 10 years. And at the same time, there's been a rise in a particular model called the affirmation model, which we've seen spread across the Western world. And this essentially means is that if a child says that they are born in the wrong body or that they are the opposite sex to the one that they are born with, then you affirm what the child says. And so in that context, the question that you asked about how do you ensure that, for example, these regional clinics don't fall prey to those same concerns is really about actually responding to the rise in gender identity theory and this notion that you have this kind of discrete gendered soul that only the individual, that child knows, and it's the responsibility of other people to not question it, to find out what other factors could be contributing to that sense of worry and anxiety, but to just affirm it. And actually, a lot of research has been done over the last 10 years and have found that, for example, the overwhelming majority of a lot of the young girls that are presenting at these clinics also have other issues. They might be autistic, some of them are victims of child sexual abuse trauma, and so on. And so it's really important that we ask serious questions of these kids, because as you mentioned in the introduction, puberty blockers have some of those effects may well be irreversible, whether that could potentially be changes in the way that you develop sexually to, for example, infertility. And these issues must be dealt with sensitively, compassionately, but serious questions must be asked to make sure the right treatment is given.
Because, Inaya, on puberty blockers itself, on the NHS website, they used to actually say, you know, nout's the matter with these things, that there potentially weren't any side effects to taking them. And that actually, if you change your mind later on, it might be absolutely fine. Now they're saying, hold on a minute, we need a review, a rapid review, that was from the CAS report, saying, actually, there might well be, consequences to these things.
Well, exactly.
What explains this change in tone by the NHS.
Well, it's interesting. The Tavistock clinic was rated inadequate by a review in 2020, and a lot of this focuses on a particular case, Kira Bell, a young female who took the Tavistock clinic to court, saying that when she was given puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones at the age of 16, that not enough questions were asked of her, and actually many of the effects from those hormonal treatments and so on may well be permanent for that young woman. And I think that a lot of people have been very scared to have an open and honest conversation, and you worry that when we're talking about children, which you would hope that as in a mature society, safeguarding and the protection of kids may well be one of the most important things that we consider. When it has come to the issue of gender identity, gender and sex, there's been a lot of difficulty speaking openly and honestly because people have feared being called transphobic or feared being called bigoted. But I think what this review is attempting to do is remind people that when it comes to dealing with children, we need to be evidence-led, we need to be compassion-led and not succumb to ideology.
Inaya, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much for keeping us informed and up to date on what's going on with the Tavistock clinic. Now, folks, we're going to go to a break, but after the break, we'll be getting a behind-the-scenes look at London's Formula E race. But before that, here's the news.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Lincolnshire police say 2 people have been arrested in connection with the death of a 9-year-old girl who died from a suspected stab wound in Boston. Police were called to Fountain Lane at around 6:20 last night. The victim is yet to be named, but police say her parents have been informed and are being supported by specialist officers. Here's Chief Superintendent Kate Anderson.
A 9-year-old girl has sadly died as a result of what we believe to be a stab wound. We've arrested 2 people in connection with the incident. We believe this to be an isolated incident, and we're pursuing extensive lines of inquiry and have committed a number of resources to this investigation. You'll see more officers patrolling the area, and we have a high number of specialist detectives who've been brought in to assist the investigation.
Southern Water has announced it's introducing a hose pipe ban. From next Friday, the 5th of August, people in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will be forbidden from using hose pipes to water gardens and clean cars. Former police officer Wayne Couzens has lost his Court of Appeal bid to reduce his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. His lawyers had argued that it was excessive, but the court ruled the sentencing judge was entitled to impose it because of the way Couzens had abused his power as a police officer. Liz Truss's campaign for number 10 has received the support of the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. It comes after the first official hustings in Leeds last night, in which Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak appeared before Conservative Party members. The AA has issued its first amber traffic warning for significant congestion for today and tomorrow. It says the worst of the traffic will be between 11 and 3 p.m, fuelled by the school holidays, a rail strike and the Commonwealth Games. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.215 and 1.191 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,448 and 41 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's 11:37 and this is To The Point with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We're live on your telly, online and radio this morning. Now, the electric car series Formula E is returning to London this weekend. 22 drivers are battling it out for victory. GB News got exclusive broadcast access to the track as they were setting up at the Excel Centre in East London. With the capital's drive, of course, to lower their emissions, what role does Formula One play in making London greener? Our reporter Alice Porter went to find out.
Down into turn 10.
London's historic Dockland is being transformed into the world's first indoor and outdoor racetrack, with all cars powered by electricity. We got a sneak peek behind the scenes from Charlie Harbord in Formula E.
It's a real logistical challenge, bringing all these different parts together and making sure everything's at the right place at the right time. We've been working at this site for nearly about 2 weeks. We've got over 2 miles worth of track, which needs to have their safety barriers either side. It all needs to be totally checked over.
The government plans to ban sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. So is London's future electric? Sustainability Director Julia Powell thinks so.
We are actually here in Newham Borough, which is the most polluted borough of London. And the reason why it's extremely important to have Formula E here in Excel is actually to showcase that there's a very concrete solution to improving the air quality levels that we all breathe in our cities. And electric vehicles from the mobility angle is a very concrete and direct solution.
There are a number of challenges with electric cars, for example, how you charge them, what sources you're using to charge vehicles. What exactly are Formula E doing to sort of address that issue?
The cars that we race are always powered with renewable energy, and that's how you can get to a carbon emission reduction through the entire life by 50 to 80% on the passenger cars that you and I will be driving.
London has had a big drive towards lowering emissions. Mayor for London, Sadiq Khan, brought in the ultra-low emission zone last year and is looking to expand it even further. And Formula E is one way of making electric cars cool.
I'm really excited that Formula E is coming back to London, coming back to the east end of London. The innovation, that technology is really exciting, but it's also environmentally friendly.
But are electric cars as green as people think? The problem is that there are more carbon emissions made during the production of electric vehicles than petrol or diesel cars. Volvo did a study which suggested you'd have to own an electric vehicle for 9 years before it was greener than a diesel or petrol car. But that would decrease significantly if you were able to guarantee that you'd be charging your electric car from more renewable sources. And with electric technology developing so quickly, it's becoming easier to make electric cars more sustainable.
Next year, we will launch the new generation of our car, which is a car that is faster, more powerful, but also more sustainable. Everything has been thought through from the design till the end of life to make sure that everything will be more sustainable and everything will be recycled at the end of the life of the car.
Tickets for the weekend are a fraction of the cost of Formula One, making it more accessible for motor enthusiasts. With London aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050, The journey to get there will undoubtedly be electric. Alice Porter, GB News.
Now we're zooming on to covering the dramatic warnings that electricity bills could reach a whopping 4,000 quid a year. Many people are going to struggle, frankly, to pay such astronomical costs. So why are we, in the United Kingdom, of course one of the richest countries in the world, in a position where people can't afford to pay their bills, choosing potentially between heating and eating? Is it right that energy companies are making megabucks in profits whilst this is happening? And could things have happened differently? Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me in the studio to discuss this further is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Liam, thank you for your
pleasure,
time
Darren.
today. Howie, this is going to be terrible, isn't it? People just have no idea of the utter shock, cataclysmic, that's going to hit them as far as bills are concerned.
Well, energy bills were spiking up last autumn, long before the war in Ukraine, which, of course, began in February and March. But since that war, wholesale prices of oil and gas, and we use gas to generate 40% of our electricity, they have really spiralled because of geopolitical tensions. Russia, of course, is a major energy exporter. And viewers and listeners will have heard too often lately about that Ofgem energy price cap. Even saying it, I'm sort of inwardly groaning. Ofgem is the energy regulator, of course, and the price cap is there in order to kind of protect consumers. There's no price cap on business users of energy, which is another very, very important issue. And that Ofgem energy price cap, Darren, you know, just this time last year is about £1,200. This is a cap on the average annual bill for households. So sort of, obviously some people's bills are higher or lower, but it's roughly the average. That went up to well over £2,000 in April, and now it's heading for £3,000 this October. And we know that because it's made up of where wholesale prices have been. The wholesale prices are the prices that the energy companies, some of which have gone bust, buy the energy at, and they then sell it on to us. But the fear now, and we're getting estimates from industry analysts whose whole reputation is make or break on their estimates, right? It's what they sell. So they're not just going to make stuff up for publicity. We're getting very credible industry analysts now looking at the projection of wholesale prices, looking at the geopolitical situation between Russia and Western Europe, which isn't getting any better, looking at the fact that the Kremlin is limiting oil and gas to Western Europe, particularly gas through that Nord Stream pipeline to Germany. And they're saying, based on where wholesale energy prices are going to be this autumn and into next year, by January, that Ofgem energy price cap, the average bill could be above £4,000 for the year 2023. And it will be front-loaded because, of course, January and February are the coldest months. So in January alone, you could see a £500-600 energy bill on average. That is not sustainable.
No. And a lot of my viewers and listeners, Liam, are saying, well, hang on a minute. If they're making billions of quid or whatever in profits, why can't we just keep the price cap what it is now?
We've got to be careful about this. I'm not defending the energy companies anyway, but the energy industry is, you won't often hear this on national television, it's downstream and it's upstream. The downstream part is getting the stuff out the ground, right? That's what the likes of Shell and BP do, right? You don't, you know, buy your gas and electricity off Shell and BP, do you? So the big energy companies who get the stuff out the ground, they are making an awful lot of money. And they're making an awful lot of money because the cost of extraction hasn't gone up that much, but prices on world markets have gone up enormously because there's scarcity and fear about getting hold of the stuff because of the geopolitical issues. The company, and they are making big profits. Companies aren't making huge profits to actually sell you the energy, right? Because they are having to pay massive wholesale prices and then selling it onto you, and they're selling it onto you in a very regulated market. Indeed, a lot of those sort of customer-facing utility companies have gone bust. And then people know they have to have their accounts ported over, which, of course, costs everyone a lot of money. There are some companies, though, like, say, Centrica, right, which is the parent company for British Gas, that have both downstream, getting the stuff out of the ground, and upstream, selling it to customers, operations. And that's why Centrica, the wholesale company that owns British Gas, has made much, much bigger profits. But because it owns British Gas, but British Gas itself, actually their profits are very, very sharply down in recent months. So it does seem really, really galling. But for the most part, we're talking about different industries doing different things. And those downstream companies have on them now a windfall tax imposed by Rishi Sunak in his last budget.
Some commentators, Liam, are saying, well, look, you compare the price of fossil fuels and you compare that with renewable technologies like wind and solar. Wind and solar is a lot cheaper right now. Why don't we just go hell for leather on those things instead of looking at fossil fuels?
Well, I think, you know, on balance and in general, renewables are a good idea, but you also need a policy mix because it's very hard to store renewable energy, Darren. And of course, we need energy at night when the sun's not shining and when the wind isn't blowing. And then you need to store that energy. Battery technology is very, very expensive. Those batteries then need rare earths, minerals that come out of the ground in difficult places like China and Central Africa and so on. So we can't just have renewables. We are going to use fossil fuels for a long time, though I think the share of fossil fuels will become less. And mainstream politicians and even environmentalists are now starting to acknowledge that more. The question is, and I think this is true, have we in our dash for net zero got rid of the fossil fuels too quickly? You know, Germany, having closed down all its nuclear power stations in the wake of the Fukushima disaster, which wasn't even a nuclear disaster, it was a natural tsunami disaster. People didn't die because of the nuclear power station there. They died tragically in Japan because of a huge tsunami. But still, Germany got rid of it's decommissioning its nuclear. It's now going back to coal-fired power stations in light of this issue it's having with getting gas from Russia. And Germany are doing that, even though the Greens are actually in government in Germany. That's why a lot of people are saying to our Conservative government, guys, you know, come on, we've got to put some of this renewable stuff on hold. That's why Liz Truss has said, of course, I'm going to not get rid of, not scrap, but suspend the renewable energy subsidies that currently make up between 10, 15, 20, 25% of everybody's electricity bill at the moment. It's a really active debate, but be in no doubt, the politicians have to say soon what they're going to do this autumn when prices go up sharply, because people are getting really concerned.
Absolutely, Liam. I couldn't agree with you more. And if people want more of that common sense, they should absolutely stay tuned for On the Money.
On the Money, 1 p.m, Monday to Friday.
Thank you very much, Liam. Now, folks, one GB News viewer has said, I grew up in a home where only one room had heating and I have survived. Well, Yvonne, that was Yvonne there saying that. Yvonne, I feel sorry for you because I tell you what, my mother has the heating on when I was a kid more than, I think, some blast furnaces. But do catch up with Liam for that more of that common sense at 1 p.m. today. Now, yesterday marked a moment in British legal history as television cameras were allowed into the Old Bailey to broadcast the sentencing of Ben Oliver for murder. Let's have a listen.
The sentence I pass upon you is therefore one of life imprisonment with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months. Once you have served that term, you will be entitled to apply for parole. However, you will not be released by the parole board unless they conclude that you no longer pose a risk to the public.
Now, although only the sentencing rather than the entire trials are currently allowed to be filmed, I'm wondering, could we be heading down the American path where there is arguably a merging of the legal system and entertainment television? Through these channels being used as court telly. Well, joining me to discuss this is the lawyer Mark Lewis. Mark Lewis, I thank you very much for your time. Mark, do you worry about this Americanisation of very serious court cases that actually determine people's lives and all the rest of it?
I don't think we are in danger of adopting the American system, even though I'm very much in favour of television in courts and seeing sentencing and even perhaps going further and seeing trials. In America, there is a completely different jurisprudence, a legal philosophy looking at how trials work. So the American system, for example, reenacts what happened in court and asks a replica jury to decide point by point The reason that there's a difference is because of the contempt of court rules. Whilst a trial is ongoing, there will not be somebody who is commenting on it, and that would be the danger. It's very useful at the moment that we have cameras now looking at sentencing. I think it will go further and look at what is happening. Courts were meant to be open to the public and generally are open to the public, but rather than going in the courtroom, it's allowing more people to see what is happening and to see how justice is being done and to hear the arguments and the evidence.
So actually, there's not this blend between a sort of commercialisation, Mark, of court cases, because I think some people really worry that actually you almost cheapen the seriousness of the content that's been discussed. I mean, yesterday, of course, it was about manslaughter. That, to me, doesn't make for good telly. It makes for quite harrowing, real-world consequences, no?
Well, I think you have to distinguish between what is good telly and what is access to justice and open justice. Justice has to be seen to be done. I think in America, sometimes justice has to be seen to be believed, but justice has to be seen to be done. Anybody could go to the Old Bailey or another criminal court and watch what is happening in a trial. And the access of television, probably 70, 80 years after television came, is basically the law catching up with the situation that already exists and saying people can watch what is happening.
Yeah, but Mark, what's going to happen to court illustrators? You know, the people that sit in courts and sketch out what's going on in court at the time. Do they stand an opportunity here of, you know, they're going to be shown the door?
Well, unfortunately, I'm sure when people were drawing on caves and then somebody said, oh, actually, there's a better investment or better invention with pens and paper, what would happen with them? Of course, things move on. We have court illustrators, they're incredibly talented and doing things, but actually, what is it in the 21st century that we're not able to see people in court using a photograph and have to have someone sketching it out? I mean, it is obviously unfortunate for people who have access to the old technology and incredible talent, but not as good as the technology that is available today. After all, you're on television and we could have had wireless.
Well, on both, Mark, on both of those mediums. But hey, I wonder how many of these judges we're going to see doing their lippy or putting on a bit of foundation like you wouldn't have done in the past, Mark. One to think about. But I thank you very much for your expertise there. That was the lawyer Mark Lewis joining to talk to us about the fact that these judgments will be televised. That's it for us here at To The Point. I thank you very much for your company. And don't go anywhere, because coming up is The Briefing with Tom Harwood, who's going to be giving you all of the latest political going-ons. And good God, there are a hell of a lot of them at the moment. And don't forget, folks, I'll be back in this chair, this very seat, 2 o'clock, Saturday and Sunday here on GB News. 2-hour specials. You don't want to miss it. We're going to be talking about all of the things addressed today and so much more. So do join me. And we'll see you tomorrow after this short break.
Hello and welcome to your forecast. Well, we've got a lot of warm weather over the next few days, some sunshine around through the course of today, but also the risk of a few showers. But as I say, it'll be pretty warm out there. Now, we've got high pressure centred to the Azores and also over Scandinavia. The UK being in between. Not many isobars means those winds are light, and that adds to that warm and humid feel that we'll be seeing over the next couple of days. Now, through the rest of Friday morning into the early afternoon, we've got some heavier rain affecting northern parts of England, but this will tend to break up into showers and they'll stretch up across many northern parts of England and also eastern Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, but elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, the best of this towards the south, and with very light winds and strong sunshine, we'll see highs of 25, perhaps to 28 degrees Celsius. And it stays warm and humid through this evening. Most of the showers fade away, but then we do see this weather front pushing in across western Scotland, getting into Northern Ireland, northwest Wales and the far north of England as well. Some quite heavy rain through the night here, but it stays dry further south with some clear spells, but a very warm night to come. Temperatures in the mid-teens nationwide. So with that warm and grey start for many through the morning, a bit of a disappointing start to the weekend across many northern and western areas. Best of any sunshine across southern areas, but the cloud will start to thicken here through the day as well, so skies turning a bit grey. But I am hopeful for a few breaks developing for East Wales and southwestern England through the afternoon. Still very warm and humid, and the heaviest of the rain starts to ease, so we will see some brighter skies coming in for Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. It stays quite wet for North Wales